Lovely. So this is the Uplift podcast stroke webinar, and today we're going to talk about something that is really important, or something that we've definitely found is really important, is leadership. You need diagnostics. And I think we all know in the world of business that data metrics are an important part of what we do. But what we've found at Uplift is leadership with diagnostics is pretty much guesswork. We can sort of think things are happening, performance is dropping, and we blame it on this, or we decide that it's all about skills and we need to skill people up. But what we wanted to bring to you today is our approach to how we can ensure there is high performance in teams through a human-centered approach. So I'm going to introduce my lovely colleague, Kate Noakes, who is going to talk through the model that we use with our clients and how, when you get rid of the guesswork and you have more of a structured approach, you can ensure that you get that high performance. We've got two lovely people with us here today as well, Alessandro and Tony. Tony is joining us from Australia, so it's quite a different time over there. But Alessandro and Tony are going to join us in that conversation today and give us their thoughts and views as we go throughout the deck. So, Kate, I'm going to hand straight over to you and let you kick it off.
Yes, and can I add my delight at seeing both Tony and Alessandro on this call? I think this area of work is all the richer for the contrast in perspectives and backgrounds. And Tony, I met, he was my, I need to celebrate, and Tony was my first ever boss in my career in airlines, and set, I believe, a young mind up for a career that became quite eclectic and quite different, as many of you know who listen to this conversation. But I really want to thank and honour you, Tony, for that, for being a special person in my career. And I'm delighted that you'll be able to bring your professional background into this conversation. And Alessandro and I met more recently in a Brighton networking event. And when you meet someone who just absolutely gets the approach where we can absolutely bring high performance and strong methodology and critical thinking, but it needs to be centered within the sort of human experience. And Alessandro and I both share that, believe that. But you really must look up Alessandro's work. We'll put the details in when we send this recording out to Alessandro's work. He's got books, he's got a lot of thought leadership out there around the area of marketing, but from this very human empathic space. So thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
But I don't know if you would want to add anything to those, anyone on the call? It's good to see you. So in order to frame this, I wanted to talk, when we explore the idea of where leadership sits and what it's trying to do, the prize that we're focusing on today is high performance. It's bringing teams together to secure the best performance in whatever field of work you represent. The risk is that we may ignore the data we need to go after that. And I want to bring a little example to the fore just to really illustrate this point before we go into the content of our approach around data and diagnostics. And if you can, for a moment, imagine what would happen if you were driving your car, for those that drive, and suddenly your dashboard switched off, or a shutter came down and you couldn't see all the information around how the car was performing. Would that change how you drive? I would imagine it probably would. You may drive a little slower, because you're trying to make sure you don't hit a speed camera without meaning to. It might be that you drive a little faster because you're not aware of your speed. You may stop off for more petrol, gas, fuel, however we describe it, because you're not sure whether your tank has run out. You may just put your radio down, your music down, so that you can hear the engine more. And I would imagine that the performance that you seek to be your absolute execution of the best performance would be affected. I imagine you would not secure that best driving experience that you wanted for yourself because you were denied the metrics. And that's what we're talking about. The ability of making sure that you have all the metrics you want. You know, the right data, the data is balanced, the data is live and available when you need it, so that you could drive whatever performance you want to get to the highest standards. And we have a model that you're going to learn about on this recording, on this call, that's called the 5C model. It just makes sure we've got a multiple number of lenses to look in on how we bring teams together to perform, to make sure that we've got every part of the dashboard working for us and the performance experience available. So I hope that's enough to intrigue you. And I'm going to kick off with the first. There's 5 C's in this model, and I'm going to kick off with the first one, which is our diagnostic area number 1, and it's the clarity, the C for clarity of direction. And the reason we frame the importance for clarity of direction is our world, increasingly so, is full of white noise. It's full of things that grab and divert our attention. It's full of illusionary imagery that affect our ability to have perspective and understand what's going on. So this makes the whole aspect of achieving performance really, really hard. So I'm going to invite you to look at a number of questions now. When you think about how well we shape the clarity of direction, when we go into an organisation and we look at what they've got, we do a playback, and we assess the balance. And the questions are on the next slide. So we do a playback and assess the balance of what's been captured in terms of what's on your dashboard. What do you measure? And how does it capture your description of success and value? What do you think should be on your dashboard for a business? And I'm going to take this point to invite our panel to explore that question. When you've worked with clients that you have or worked with organizations, what do you feel they typically go after in their dashboard? Maybe what do you think they might miss out? Lisa, I'll start with you just to give our guests a bit of time. But when people are looking at the measures, what do they emphasize and focus on in terms of describing success and value? And what do you think they might miss out?
I think the first thing, Kate, is that I think people tend to measure success before they measure value. So I think that's a very clear thing, is that we tend to look at success and performance and how are we doing. So I think it's all about, if I look at it through a sales lens, I worked in sales for a very long time. It's like, have you hit your target? How many new customers have you got? Have you hit your revenue targets, your margin targets, your profit targets? It's about volumes. It's about numbers. And maybe not a focus on the value of the services. I worked in IT services for a long time. The value of the service that you are delivering. So perhaps more, it's more about number. How well are we doing? You know, it's like if you're selling products, how many products have I got out? Yeah. How many new products have I got? How many new marketing campaigns? It's that sort of measurements.
Yeah, and I hadn't really thought of the differentiation between success and value, and success offering the emphasis on financial results, sales lines, how many items sold, whatever the metric is. Yeah. And then also the broader experience and value of what we might be marketing or selling. So that's a lovely segue. Alessandro, are you happy to join that conversation and share what your experiences of people that you work with, what they may measure and what they may focus on and what they may miss?
Absolutely. So as you mentioned at the very beginning, my background is in consumer psychology. So understanding why people buy what they buy. And what I noticed that, first of all, success and value, they are very subjective. But what I notice in particular with the Human Advantage podcast, we usually try to measure success and value from us as a company point of view rather than the recipient point of view. So if I'm a client, I have a different perception of value and success. Mm-hmm. And if I'm a company and I measure my success as a company, and the value from a recipient point of view, from the client point of view, is where we can exponentially increase the value for our product or service. So I notice a lot of companies, they measure success and value from their perspective rather than from the client's perspective. And that is key.
That is a brilliant ad. Thank you.
Yeah. Can I just add something, Kate? Because that's really triggered something. So I've just spent 2 days up at the meeting show in London in the events industry. And a lot of the education and speakers were talking about return on engagement rather than return on investment, and very much talking about how they measure engagement of people that are going to their events. the events industry is changing quite considerably. Events are getting smaller because people want to experience things in a different way. And so the engagement is something that they're now thinking about measuring, as opposed to, well, what was the ROI on that? How many did we sell? It's like, how many people will go to an event and remember it for 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, and still be talking about it? So I thought that was quite a nice add to what Alessandro was just saying.
It's a great example, and it's shown when quality and depth of thought is applied to this, we get to some really good areas and ways of measuring our value and therefore achieving our success. Tony, are you able to join in and add from your perspective in terms of how measurements are for organisations are captured in your experience in Australia and beyond? I think you're on mute at the moment, so I'm just checking you're able to.
I've got my mic. Sorry, I had my mic on mute. So a lot of the organisations and companies that I'm sort of, more engaged with at the moment, the reason that they're bringing in sort of leadership, let's say training or awareness, is to shift that connection that they have with their people. And Lisa, what you were just saying about the levels of engagement that they have, a lot of people are really sort of focusing in on, how they can improve that engagement that they have with their employees. And they're seeing that sort of the leaders are probably the people that have the most amount of influence in those areas. And so the tendency tends to be more to sort of focus on, upskilling leaders to be able to give them the people skills that they need and to be able to have meaningful conversations with people that is going to improve that level of engagement and connection that they have, with the organisation as well. So that's one specific area that we know that we're getting sort of more of a focus on. And I think the other element of it is the shift between people are sort of sensing that there's not so much of a focus on, I'm going to say, the bottom line as much as there is in terms of, being able to keep their people engaged. And the value aspect is, how do they add value to their employees so that they want to, retain within the organization, they want to stay with them for longer periods of time. Because there is a lot of movement, I think, particularly here in Australia, with people just bouncing around trying to find, good leaders to work with or work under. Because that sort of tends to be more of a, I'm going to say, a fulfillment or a purpose that people are looking for now. It's not chasing the money anymore. It's chasing sort of, levels of satisfaction and fulfillment within the role that they've got. And that's driven by, good leaders in organizations. So I think there's a shift that's starting, maybe here in Australia, where people are seeing that, one of the things that they're trying to understand at a much deeper level is that element of culture. What is it that drives the culture within this organization? And, what are some of the things that we can do that can shift that culture in the right direction? That seems to be the things that people are wanting to measure. That's where people are seeing that, there are, let's say, avenues of success that they can look down. And also then, who is it and what is it that's going to bring that about? And I think that's the shift that we're seeing. So when those things start to happen within an organization, there's definitely a sense of this is working and this is better, and everybody's connected and everybody's engaged, and we're seeing performance, shoot through the roof. And that seems to be one of the key drivers, certainly here in the government space, but also in the private sector as well, in terms of corporates and places like that.
I love it. And it's an absolute acknowledgement. I mean, Lisa and I are smiling because the contributions of the panel absolutely show the progress and where this work is going. So smiling at a number of things that you brought up. And it is a case for when we do the diagnostic work around this clarity of direction, it's assessing again the quality and accuracy and clarity of the metrics, but also how well they, as you have introduced, they integrate and balance off. So it's not enough alone to just simply go after, for those that are in the private sector, the profit alone, and maybe some of them the profit margin lines, but it is in there. We absolutely say it absolutely is a feature. It's the interrelationship of part of a bigger landscape. So there are 6 areas that we're offering as a little bit of a information takeaway to consider whether your metric, your dashboard, your however you capture your measurements have. And one is, as we've still back there, sorry Lisa, one is profit. One is the operational credentials. So we're saying how well in the area of work they operate and deliver and do the what of their work. So there's that one as the number 2. There's also how well they manage their resources in whatever way they are. That's number 3. That features. One that again, I think Tony, you talked about government, but it's relevant in private as well, but very, very prevalent in government and public sector is the legality, safety, compliance piece. That needs to be measured and understood. And then alongside it, how we hold our teams together, how we engage, how we retain, how we inspire, how we look after, how we hold their well-being is a feature. And then what you brought in, Alessandro, the whole customer landscape, how they are reached, how they are connected heart to heart, the loyalty that's built, how they feel the relevancy of us, how they feel the safety and trust within us features in it. So those 6 areas are one of the kind of core 6 we call in terms of the balancing criteria. So do you think I've missed anything there that you would add? I've just put that out to the call. What does that feel like?
I think that covers most of it in general.
But it's in the nuance. So, and that's where there's the slide of how, when we look at the clarity, in the next slide, when we look at the clarity, there are 2 parts, I think, to clarity. It's the quality of how they're messaged, how much the team, the frontline understand the metrics, but then how they actually get received. So the effect of them are the two bits that are worth sort of paying attention to and looking at understanding. And I think I can illustrate this with an example. It was with a client that we were working with that had actually a very clear and broad set of metrics. They had a lot of background, a lot of contribution, a lot of work to capture all the metrics that defines their value and their success. But something happened. It's kind of the interplay that Tony, you bring in with culture, which happens to be our second C. But the interplay with culture is that what was happening here, there was something that was forming that whilst they understood the metrics, the frontline had a growing sense of not feeling totally psychologically safe. There was a sense of, if I underperform, it will attract a huge amount of attention. Therefore, I certainly don't want to risk that. But if I overperform, I may also attract attention, and that's not okay because I'm not sure how that will interact and affect my way of work. So their effect of these metrics were totally clear, but what was happening was they were securing and going after mediocrity to be this invisible middle layer, which I'm sure was not the intention of the leadership, but it was forming. And it was just a really fascinating study of clarity of direction, but there was an effect piece of how it was received. Interesting. And that segues nicely to our next C, which so it smiled a lot when you talked about it, Tony, in terms of how do we create a culture that hosts all of the potential within an organization and allows it to convert to performance. And we've got in the 5C model, we've got a lot of interplay, but one of the most critical effects that we've seen in there is, as a marker of the healthiness of a culture, is the agility and ease that they can go after change. It's one of the kind of best descriptors of an effective culture. And one of the content inspirations that, I don't know, do you want to add there?
No, I'm just agreeing with you.
And some of the work that we use when we look at this cultural environment, and we've got some metrics that we're going to introduce a bit that sort of allow us to look at some of the component parts. But one of the bodies of work that we were really inspired by when we were looking at cultural success and how well it hosts easy and agile change was the work of James Barron and Michael Hannon. I hope I have captured that correctly. Barron and Hannon. and they did a whole group of work in culture typing. So they described 5 culture types, which I'll quickly list for the audience to reflect on whether they think they may sit in which one, and then also have a view of which one hosts the agile and easiness of change. So these 5 types, one is called the star culture. It's a culture where there's a pretty generous budget that allows the best talent that has the most fame maybe attached their talent to be brought into a team, and the hope is that with those best in class talents brought, that you will get high performance. The thing is, sometimes you can, but it's also very fragile. You know, it can work brilliantly well, but it can also go catastrophically wrong because of the nature of how those talents come together. So star culture is one. Another one is autocratic culture. So it's often found when there's founders or when there's a very strong charismatic leader, and they assert their way onto an organization and create a culture that follows their command. And again, there are times when this works incredibly well because it's clear, directional, and says what it wants. However, it has difficulty sustaining when size of organization grows, and also when founder changes. It doesn't have the continuity of performance. So it has its risks as well as its opportunities. The third culture type is bureaucratic, which is where we have basically a strong component part of middle management that have bureaucracy and policy to make their way, to communicate their way of culture. And again, this has strengths because it has continuity and consistency and clarity, but it also doesn't tend to get excellent performance. It tends to lock into a sort of middle level of performance, can be quite attached to organizations that have high policy regulatory environments. The fourth type is engineering, which is where you celebrate technical brilliance and you bring in the technical experts. And again, it can work incredibly well, but it's a bit like star culture, a bit reliant on how team come together. The fifth one is described in their work as the commitment culture. It's the one that's the most abstract and conceptual. It's about individuals being connected emotionally with the nature and the spirit of the work that the organization prizes. It can feel less tangible or less hard to execute. It takes longer to establish. But going full circle in this slide here, why the importance of agility needs to change. It's the most hosting of agile and easy change because the workforce has communicated and connected with the direction of travel. And it's an extraordinary thing to see when that comes about. So that's an area that we work on. And I just wonder again, having given that description of culture types, star, autocratic, bureaucratic, engineering, technical, and commitment, emotionally connected culture, I'm going to go around the call again and say, what's your sense of what you're seeing out there with the people that you work with? And Lisa, are you happy to kick off again? What do you see as the culture type of?
And I think it varies a little bit between the public and private sector. I think if, having spent some time in the public sector, bureaucracy is part of that. And it needs to be in some ways because it's, they've got to make sure things are done, but things are slow. It takes a lot of time to get anything done because you have to go through the levels of bureaucracy, hierarchy, policy, procedure, etc. In the private sector, I think it does depend on the leadership of the company and the personalities of the company, and maybe the size. So I've worked with some really I can't remember the commitment culture, isn't it? That's it, the commitment. So I've worked with companies like that where everybody seems to have a voice, everybody is heard. There's this energy and excitement of wanting to be there, and you can feel that change is, it's not always easy, but people accept it and are happy with the change. But then you get other organizations that are, if you've got a leader that is, I don't like to use the word dominating, but they're in charge. And people follow because they love, they trust, they respect this person. But if that person was to, break a leg and have to be off for 6 weeks, things are going to struggle to keep going. So,
yeah. And I'm also thinking of those particular cultures that whilst they feel that they're safe, that in terms of there's momentum and direction through the founder or leader's force of nature, it doesn't always, there's risk that it doesn't always encourage wider voices to be shared across the organization, because it might not feel okay to do that. I'm sort of drawn to that memory of what can be a risk of that culture type.
Yeah. And I think, one thing to say is that within organizations as well, you can get mini cultures. So within departments or even regionally, you can see slight differences. So I think that can be a challenge as well.
It's a culture within a culture. It's a really interesting added complexity of managing this part.
Yeah.
I'm going to go I'll go in a different direction, but let's go to Tony next, and then Alessandro. So Tony, in terms of your experience of the cultural types that you've experienced with clients and the ones that are prevalent and maybe the ones that again are struggling to surface, what have you noticed?
Yeah, I really like the descriptions that you had there, Kate, because I was sort of, when you were going through them, it was easy to pick sort of organizations, companies, even departments that I've worked with, when I can sort of almost pick that style of culture that sort of emanates, from that particular group. But I've also worked in lots of organizations where there is, like Lisa was saying, a real mixed bunch of different cultures across different organizations, in the silos and all those sorts of elements that people become quite protective. And I sort of see culture as being, here's how we do this here, and it's very much about the culture that the leader I'm going to say emanates to the rest of the people around them. So if there is a fear culture that comes from the top of the organization, then that tends to flow through the rest of the thing. And it may be that fear is driven from the tops, but it's certainly felt and fed by everybody at the bottom of the organization as well. There's others where you've got sort of a real collaborative sort of culture where they all work together, and there's everybody gets a voice, everybody gets a say, because they value that, because they see that that's the best way for them to move forward. That's how they get the results when they have a collaborative type of culture as well. So I think there's different cultures for different reasons in different areas. And I think what I've often found is that, I often get brought in, or, I've gone into an organization that has a problem with a culture, but they don't see it because, it's almost wood for the trees type of thing. It's a big blind spot for them. And it's not until you make it really prevalent to them, where you really show them what it is and how it operates and how it actually affects and drives not only the business, but the people, the customers. Everything is driven by that culture that's created. And I think sort of where you say here, the agility and ease of change is when you want to change that culture, it's how much resistance do you get? How much resilience in that change element do organizations lean into? Can they lean in and change what they do and how they do things for a better outcome? Or is it just from fear? Is it just from, we won't do this? Or who are you? What do you know? Whereas what you're trying to do is to help them see what they can't see and help them actually shift to do something that is going to be better for them, all around, not just sort of, in that one little space that they operate in. So it's a different thing in different organizations. I think sort of, to go back a long time ago, Kate, the biggest culture shift that I had was when I left British Airways and I went to work for Qantas in Sydney. And for me, I went from an organization that was very empowering and wanted to grow people, they wanted you to do the best thing that you possibly could. I went from that culture to a culture that was completely the opposite when I got to Australia. And I really struggled. And it felt like I'd gone back 10, 15 years in my career. And I landed in an organization that was so, I suppose, so driven by fear, but also not able to change, not be agile, not be able to look at things easily. Everything was difficult. And that to me was sort of, I think, sort of my biggest culture shock in all of my career, was that move from one airline to another, and just seeing, what it was like to work in a very difficult, organization that had a very sort of, stiff culture about it. It wasn't easy and it wasn't flowing. So yeah, it was really interesting, just that whole dynamic. But when I go into organizations now and I see that, bringing about that change, or just helping them to see what that is part of the challenge, I think, in terms of what it is that we're trying to do. And I think where you're leading to, in terms of having data or having information that can help them see what that looks like, and where they need to shift and why, and what that's going to mean for them. I think that's really, what we need as an industry in terms of, coaching and leadership, is to be able to prove and demonstrate through facts and data that this is what happens when we do what we do.
Yeah, it makes the case for this approach of getting objective information that allows us to have a sense of how the culture is shaping. But I also want to acknowledge, when you describe that experience of moving into a fear culture, particularly in contrast to an alternative culture before, it was taking me to my own experiences of exactly the same, and my memory of how that made me go incredibly small in order just to navigate it. But if you use those descriptors of agility and ease of change, somebody could have made the case that was achieving agile and easy change, but I don't know if it really was. I think it was pretending to. It was the pretense of change, because under that sort of shadow of fear, things happen, but it didn't really feel that embedded. And certainly it was reluctant engagement as opposed to wholehearted, full engagement that I think we're capturing here. But I'm feeling myself very connected to some memories when I've experienced the same. So. Alessandro, would you like to build on this story of culture, ease and agility of change, and your experiences and perspectives on this?
Absolutely. So probably if I use like the analogy of the soil and the seed, where I see the soil is the culture and the seed is the single individual. I notice a lot of companies they have a lack of clarity in terms of direction. There are a lot of people, even at the very high level, that they do like scatter things. They don't know exactly where they want to go. And based on my experience, when I work with clients, I always say we need to build a business that is a self-managing business. So you as the manager, you as the CEO of the company, if you want to go on holiday for 1 month or 2 months or 3 months, the company needs to run without your presence. And when they ask me, how can we do this? I usually say your HR should hire people that they are not employees in terms of mindset, but entrepreneurs. Meaning that despite the fact that your contract is as an employee of the company X, you need to have the mindset of an entrepreneur. How can I try to pretend that I'm running my business despite I'm part of the ecosystem or I'm part of the company? And the lack of direction and the lack of hiring entrepreneurs rather than just hiring employees that they fill a specific position, that is, for me, is the strongest and the easiest and lesser price. Is a very cost-effective way of growing a business. So it's having a direction which influence, like you make the soil very fertile, but every seed, every single individual needs to have the right entrepreneur mindset rather than an employee mindset, where I see myself as growing my business, and that is going to multiply in an exponential way my impact as a single individual.
And I'm taking that list of 5 culture types from the work that we shared, the Baron and Hannon work that we shared. That entrepreneurship doesn't feel very nurtured in autocracy, bureaucracy, even to a degree star culture. It might be selectiveness there and technical, but the commitment culture that's identified as hosting agile and easy change does feel that it also mirrors this entrepreneurship.
Yes, and I understand that the many CEO of the companies, when I work with them, they say, but I'm scared that this person is going to build their business based on what they are learning here. there is that
Mm.
risk. But if you like run a business with this kind of risk in your mind, you are gonna reduce the potential of growing a sustainable and profitable business. So I can understand that there is a flip side for that, but
yeah, and I'm reminded that Richard, we're having a bit of an airline theme today, Richard Branson theme, that I think he was saying that what if I develop them and they leave? And then I think he adds, what if I don't develop them and they stay? So it is that dilemma. So yes, and that's a long-lasting quote. And what I'm going to do next is to introduce the third C. I'm going to actually introduce all 5 C's because there's a little story to share around here. Because the third C is competence, and it's what the practices, the systems, the technical skills of an organisation that they enable us to achieve high performance. The thing is, what we notice is that there is a risk that sits around them that we're going to reveal called the complexity trap. And it's where an organisation believes that the only way that they can drive performance is through this singular area of what we do. And so we're going to introduce in the whole 5 C's, we're going to just alert ourselves to the risk of where complexity can form. And complexity, as we see on this visual on the screen, is where we add more and more task, but it stops adding value. And it's a common and frequently shared aspect that we hear from our teams. So in this next slide that's going to come up, I'm going to walk through each of the 5 C's in our model and talk how they interrelate. We've already been introduced to the first one, which is capturing the clarity of direction, that we understand what is success, we understand what is value. We have a dashboard of balanced measures that capture absolutely all that we prize and value, and they are communicated and understood and received in a way that has the effect that we want. That sits at the top of this diagram because in a way it becomes our constant and singular truth. If we achieve the success of those performances, we're getting the other component parts right. If we're struggling, it means we're making something not quite in balance and working effectively. The second one that we talked about was the importance of understanding having a culture that hosts agile and easy change. And there's a great body of work, as we said, that we've accessed there. But what we feel that really holds it together is there is a shared big picture in totality, the purpose of the organisation, the sense of identity I take from working for this organisation, the behaviours that are hosted in this organisation, they all sit as part of it. And there are good, robust governances in place because you want the culture that you want to have rather than the one you've got by default. And we even get to talk about some of the players within the culture. Are your architects there? Are your assassins? So there's a whole group of work that allows us to understand that. And the reason that the culture sits underneath the direction and the clarity direction is that the culture is a thing that enables performance to happen fast, quicker, robustly, sustainably. Without a culture, it makes it more difficult. But this pillar that sits in the middle, this pillar of competency, is absolutely part of the story. It's part of the story that if we have skills, high skills, processes that are robust and competent, systems that work and interact and interrelate, standards that are high, and we execute them well, we should be able, through this culture, to get those measures that we want, the results that we want at the top. The thing is, if this is your only lever, if this is your only way of securing performance, when there's underperformance, where you go to is you add in more skills. You might do some more training of competencies. You might put in an audit of an audit of an audit in order to try and grow the results in this area, in order to try and get the business results going. Does that see how it flows through culture into the clarity of direction? And what we hear, and when we share this in classroom, they go, you have just described our organisation. It seems to be like the universal truth that in effort to try and drive clarity of direction and results, the only lever that we use are skills, processes, systems and standards. And if we add complexity there, all it seems to do is frustrate the front line and not get the results. And people go, yes, you've just spoken into my world. Can you tell everyone about this? Because this is the frontline truth we hear. And it's because we forget that there are 2 other pillars. Yeah. There's the pillar that's going to get revealed next, which is the pillar of the character we bring. This is basically the individual character, the seeds that you talk about, Alessandro. If we can grow the character of the component parts, we grow the sense of trust and integrity, morality, conviction, commitment, connection, confidence. All of these aspects are grown within the individual character. They then bring that to their competencies. That means that we tend to flow through the culture into high performance at that top box. It really, really enables it without all the complexity trap that we can find around competency as your only lever. So it's an area that we're going to talk about in a minute, but it's the area that that we really prize in terms of growing character. And we have a measurement system that a number of you know about, that listen to our recordings from time to time, that we really feel there's nothing that does it better. But I do want to complete the picture, which is the final C is our kind of course of direction, our pathway ahead, and the age-old dilemma of, do I stay my course or do I correct my course? And again, we're going to look at this a little bit more later on in the call to just have that conversation. It's very thematic and topical in the UK at the moment. Now, if you were to look at our political environment, but the idea is, if we have the course, does it need some constancy and continuity, or does it need some course correction? And the whole area of how we identify areas of change, how we go after continuous improvement, how we find innovation that hosts the market changes that we need, is the final piece. Because if our competency is where we want it and our character has grown and we're still not getting the results, it may be that the course correction is the way to go. So I hope I've given those that are listening there an overview of these 5 areas that we have measurements and ways of exploring how an organisation is performing, to see where the challenges and difficulties lie. But that going back to that idea of complexity, is this what people are seeing as still a trap for a lot of your clients? And again, Alessandro, I'll go in reverse order. Alessandro, are you seeing your clients work with or fall into that complexity trap, or have they learned?
Yes, so complexity, I think, is normal for human beings, in particular when we try to add more to grow, when in reality the only ways to grow is to reduce the amount of things to do. And we believe that the more something is complex, the more people perceive value, whether like any kind of stakeholder, whether it's like maybe my colleague, my boss, or maybe a client or an investor. We believe that the more something is complex, the more is valuable, which is not true. And what I tend to do, in particular with the marketing asset or marketing activities, help them to actually reduce from maybe 40, 50 marketing assets to 5. We just need to focus on the most important 5 that help you to grow 10x your business rather than a 2x. And as human beings, we are scared to reduce things because we believe that it's going to also reduce the value. Why? Is the other way around. So complexity, I think, is part of our human nature, that we believe we have this misconception that the more complex, the more valuable, but it's not like that.
Yeah, that's you've called out a well-held truth that complexity equals more valuable, and actually there's a kind of counter truth there.
Yes.
That simplicity can generate more value, but we're pulled into it because it feels there's something in the human mind and the human ego that if I'm busy, I'm productive, my calendar is full, and you can't, and I'm running around from session to session without a moment to breathe, that I get some sort of sense of self-worth from it. But it's a bit of a delusional one.
Yes.
Oh, good.
I've got
Tony,
something to share here, Kate, which goes back quite a few years when I first started my fitness business. And I remember sitting in a networking meeting, and you'll laugh at this, Alessandro, I'm sure. And I had been marketing the hell out of my business. So I'd been posting flyers, networking, I'd done like everything that I possibly could, and it just wasn't working. And I actually burst into tears because I was like, I don't understand. And this lovely lady put her hand on my arm and said, stop, breathe, and sit back, and you need to simplify what you're doing, and then it will come. And she was so right. I just kept thinking, right, what's the next thing I can do? What's the next solution? And I've seen it. I remember it in, when I was in IT services and service delivery, we'd add in another step and add in another bit and add in another form, and to try and make it work. And then when you strip it all back and simplified it, it works so much better. So I just wanted to share that because hopefully people will resonate.
think so. I love it. It's making me smile because I remember a mentor of mine saying, if it feels like you're trying too hard, you probably are.
You are.
I went, oh yes, Dan, you got it. And that was absolutely true. Might even been you, Tony, to be fair. Might have been you. That was a wise soul that said that to me.
I'm just sort of like looking at this, the 5 C's that you have here, and I'm trying to sort of relate that to, let's say, challenges that I have when I'm starting with a new client, or an area in the public service. And I suppose one of the questions I have from this is that when you use this, do you go in with an approach that there's one area that you're going to hone in on or focus on first? Or is it a little bit of everything that you work on? Or do you know sort of like, hey, when we're going into this organization, it's about sort of getting the competency elements of this right? That's where we've got to work. That's where the grunt of the work is going to be. The rest will come into play if we can fix that one thing. I just wondered, whether you've either used this or how you would use it in that sort of way, because I've often sort of, gone into an organization with a similar sort of approach to this in terms of trying to, I'm going to say, triage how I'm going to help this business, get some results fairly quickly, but also be able to know, what is the right area to move into first, because sometimes the rest of that, like you were saying before, okay, the rest of this can be working. It's just the course correction that's wrong, or they just don't see it, they just don't get it, and with a little bit of a shift in that area, things start clicking and they come together again. So I was interested, just from your perspective, is how is it used, or how do you see this being sort of an approach that you can work in with a company or an organization?
It's a great question, and there's possibly 2 extreme ends of it, and then a few varieties in between. We may have a client commission, which is do the diagnostic work, and that's an absolute delight, because you've got pace of identify the triaging, you called it, the pace of progress beyond it, because we're looking at it in a totality, and there's absolute benefit in that. I would say that's probably still the rarer brief, though, because typically clients and organizations have a view of where they think their issues are, and sometimes they may be absolutely spot on. As I said, frequently less so, because their model of leveraging the organization is, let's go after competency, let's train more transactional, more technical, and that's their habit. And it might even be encouraged to do it by government influences, for example. So there's all of that aspect in there. There's a pressure there, and I think in that other extreme is we enter where we enter, knowing this in the background, knowing that we're starting to build a picture of where the things are, and when trust and relationship may be established, we can bring some more fast track challenge to where the work sits. But you typically get the door open where the door is open. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. Like I said, I've used lots of different models, when I've gone in and particularly sort of done, the diagnostic aspect of it, the early stages. And it's really just sort of trying to have a tool or have, some information, some data that you can work with that identifies where the problem areas are, so that you at least sort of can start to make some headway into that space to see if that sort of is one of the key pillars that's going to bring about that shift or change that they're looking for, let's say.
And I mean, one of my favorites, besides the total diagnostic, is the qualitative. Let's just have conversations and interviews with people, and again, cross the organization, frontline. There's no more difficult truth in your frontline, even if it's frustratingly truthful. It's their reality, and they are your arms and hands and legs, and if they're offering a perspective, even if it's a frustrating perspective, there's learning there. So time with frontline conversations are gold when you can have those two. So I'm going to catch, because I realized, Elise, was anything you wanted to add to this?
I don't think
this
so.
overview, because we're going to return to.
I think move on to the next
we're going to complete the picture by giving a little bit more time. We introduced this model sort of mid-section rather than because we just felt it talked to that competency complexity trap piece. But let's complete the picture of the other two strands and how we go about them and what we can learn from them. And the one I want to look at now is the character column. And this is where we have a methodology because it has diagnostic capabilities. It has metrics that measure individual, team and organizational behavior across what you'll see here is it's called Heart Styles. It was born out of Australia, Tony, so by a husband and wife team who have now returns there. And it's their lifelong work rooted in organizational psychology, individual psychology. And to capture it at its highest level, it's a measurement system that has behavior markers but reveals what's going on in someone's human character. And it talks above the line and below the line. Above the line being where we are our most effective self. We are those seeds that flourish in good soils. And we achieve organizational performance better. We achieve relational interactions better. We have our own well-being markers go up. So it looks at all those aspects and correlates to those. But if within our character, we can elevate the idea of how I can be highly effective in how I bring myself and show up to work and grow my character. The spirit of that character growth is to emphasize in the blue quadrant humility and courage, and we can measure it and we can compare to population. How humble and how courageous is your character, because humility allows us to have purpose beyond self. Humility allows us to receive challenge and feedback and seek it and grow. And humility allows us to also take pride in difficult, prized contributions that we make, challenge. And alongside it is courage, the courage to set the bar high, the courage to keep going when it's tough, the courage to grow and receive information, the courage to show up authentically as you, all sits within this character growth area that we can do with individuals and teams to elevate that and get the results that you can get off it, i.e. better delivered competencies, a healthier culture that drives those results from that model. But humility and courage needs love and respect, because those are the environments that others around us will need to feel safe to grow. If we offer them respectful love, even when we don't like them sometimes or like the behaviors that they're bringing, is the environment that we will get the best out of people. And if you can just sort of bring that to life. And this model, the other things that we like about it is also talks about how within our character journey, we may be pulled off course, away from our most effective selves. And it's where two things may become present. The orange box describes and measures when we start to experience the sense of threat, psychological threat, social threat, emotional threat from our environment of work. I feel that I might be rejected. I feel my job might not be safe. My reputation might not be safe. And because I fear it, I start to go really small. And these behavioral measurement areas are part of that defense response of I feel scared, I go small, I give all my opportunity and all my potential over to you because I don't feel safe to bring my best self to work. And fear can sometimes travel to pride and ego, which is where I still feel that bit of an imposter syndrome here, and maybe a bit of lifelong background where I don't feel worthy, valuable, and I don't know if I even like myself, and where that starts to sit somewhere with someone's psychology and the work exaggerates it and pokes it. My responses will be these kind of quite rash, emotionally distancing, relationship degenerating, energy intensive responses of behaviors there that take me away from humility, courage, love and respect. And so this is our story of human character and our way of measuring human character and giving it description and understanding and compassion. If you go to fear and ego, you are normal, because that is what life is. But it really helps to have some data that this offers to say, had you realized how much fear has started to grip your heart? Had you realized how much ego was becoming part of your defense response? And maybe how little others were experiencing in you of your humility, courage, or how unsafe they felt around your way of working. It's probably the most fast route description of what's getting in the way, but it can be the most transforming and inspiring when you access it, because you feed off it as much as the people around you that benefit from it. So I've done that today, but for the sake of this call, we've done other webinars on this in a bit more detail, but I wanted to frame this description of human character, the knowledge that it can be measured, and the kind of work it brings. So again, do you mind, Lisa, if I go to you just to talk about this, that you're an accredited practitioner in this space with a lot of experience, what you found this brings to the world of getting teams towards high performance?
I think the biggest thing with this, Kate, is it's such a simple model to understand for people. And I've seen so many people that have gone through this at very different levels in an organization, from, you know, frontline staff right up to CEOs. And it sort of opens a window to understand human behavior in its simplest terms, and the fact that we will all behave in a particular way. It's not giving you a label of you're a this or you're a that, I'm a blue or I'm a red or I'm in this letter. It's a way of seeing yourself and others and how that interaction happens. We haven't got enough time to really go into it, but everybody that I've worked with and gone through this, whether it's a team together or whether it's an individual person, has sort of almost taken a sigh of relief to go, oh, I get it now. I get it. And it's such a simple way to see how people are behaving. So we can have a sense of a team not working well together, and somebody might say the manager's a micromanager. I mean, like, but actually when the team can understand perhaps what's driving that micromanager to be a micromanager and have some respect and can relate to them, things change.
Nice. So accessibility and universality, I think, are the two bits I've heard.
Yes.
So that it's highly accessible, depending on and the universality is it seems to keep applying to whatever background and wherever you are in your own character journey. It seems to bring something in terms of insight that can help grow the character. And again, to frame its piece within that 5C model, character at group level is culture. So these interplay quite significantly. The measurement systems that we bring to individual character can absolutely be captured and looked at an organizational team level to provide an additional bit of insight around how that is shaping up using this compass.
I think actually one other thing to add here, Kate, and we talked about this on a previous webinar, is it also is a really good way of capturing the energy in an organization. And you can start to see where teams are, you know, either burning out or are going to be burning out because of the energy and where they're sitting within this model. So I think from a health and well-being point of view, you know, the world we live in at the moment, everything is fast, quick, you know, do. This also allow that well-being piece, which it's really important to me, health and well-being, because if you haven't got your health, nothing. But as an organization looking after their employees, I think it can really help with that.
Yeah, and what I would before I'm going to bring in, I think I'll bring in Tony next, actually, get ready. So just to share your perspectives on this one. But the thing that I'm reminded of when we're working in team settings, you sometimes get that interplay of teams such that you may have a leader that brings quite a lot of the ego, prideful, green behaviors. And yet their commentary is, why are my team fearful? Why are they all orange? But it's because those interrelationships create that very lock and load in dynamic of kind of controlling and dependency that sit within these ones that start to entrench. And so we often, when we're working with this way of exploring it, we can see those patterns of kind of how teams start to form that hold them away from what we call above the line opportunity. So Tony, what would you
how sorry, just a question about this first and foremost. How do you capture the data? Is it just through a questionnaire? Is it basically a number of questionnaires that sort of builds a profile on that person? Is that how it works?
It's a 75 set questionnaire, so which have behavior markers that capture presentation of character. So they have them, but they have multiple lenses. You reveal what your values are, so how you value yourself across these measurements, how you think you are being at the moment, and then you get a 360. So you get like 3 mirrors in on your character story from that, but it's designed again for accessibility. It's very it's sort of a 10-minute experience to go in and into those things, and then it generates against population to say against population you are perceived as being far more authentic than the average leader, for example, or opportunity to elevate your authenticity because it's not being experienced by others can be the kind of learning.
Yeah. Oh, because we've used a number of different sort of profiling, I say processes and just sort of models, and it's more just to create that sort of level of awareness, particularly when we're working sort of either in a team or across different teams, and it's just sort of understanding the dynamics of that and how we can tap into that. And just sort of, I suppose, hold a mirror up to that to help people see sort of, you know, what they're not seeing, or also to help them sort of just have a little bit more awareness just in terms of how things can operate and can operate differently as well. And that's sort of where we've really used this type of character building tool to shift that sort of
it's where measurements
interaction
again
or
show
collaboration between people.
Yeah. The other bit I'll just frame for those listening in is the predominant approach of psychometric tools that do this kind of work are what we call typing tools. So what they do is they take the data that they acquire and they categorize people into a type of team player, a type of way of liking communication, a type of way that you like to make decisions. So it sort of types that's a brain preference. The thing about this one is it doesn't type. It's one of the few that doesn't type. It simply says strategies have formed to this place, but you can develop and grow and evolve beyond it from a place of knowledge and information. So just wanted to capture that contrast to the majority of tools that most people will be familiar with. Works subtly differently.
It does look different. I haven't seen this one before, so even though it's here in Australia, but it's it looks very interesting. I'd be very interested in have a look and see, you know, how it works and what it can be used for, you know, in different aspects of, you know, working with people.
And how about yourself, Alessandro, when you talk about character?
Yes, you know me that I wrote like 2 books about empathic marketing and meta marketing, because this is really like important. In particular, one of in the previous slide, in terms of character, you mentioned about connection, and what I see that when we talk about connection, I need to understand the other person in order to connect with the other person. So how can I put myself in the shoes of the other person is what I call like empathic marketing. Whether I'm selling an idea, an opinion, a product or service is exactly the same. I'm selling something to the other person. So if I want to connect with the other person, is to understand, for example, in terms of humility, love, pride, and fear, the other person. Where I see a lot of potential is that in order to understand the other person, in order to connect with another person, I need to first understand myself, and we lack that one. Many people don't really put themselves in the shoes of the other person, but when they put in the shoes of the other person, they can't really understand the other person and maybe the peculiarities of the other person, because first of all they can't understand themselves. So it's so very important to first of all understand yourself, and then try to understand other people and what is my strength, can maybe balance the weakness of someone else and vice versa, rather than see other people as maybe competitors, or rather than if I'm a company, I try to hire everyone with a very low level, rather than try to maybe balance different characteristics based on this or based on like the hard style, in order to create a culture where everyone maybe reinforce the strengths and the weaknesses of the other person. But you need to start from you as the single individual, then in your team, and then maybe in the future between the company and the client.
Yeah, it reinforces that point of whichever area of specialism that we're bringing in and trying to grow within our client competency, the human center of it is critical.
Yes.
And there's no more greater expression than to be able to offer empathy, to have empathy alongside the regard unconditional regard that we hold for people. So it's a great
But we can
segue.
offer empathy when we understand ourselves first.
Yes.
If you can't understand yourself, you can't empathize with another person.
That's true. That's true. So your own human experience has to be formed in order to apply to others. Yeah. That's such a good reminder. I'm going to move to the next, the final C that you will remember from that share, which is our direction of course. And we thought, what angle do we put on it now? And then the geopolitical environment does its work for us. And this week we saw in the UK another change of our prime ministership. And was it 7 in 10 years? We are, scared to blink, and there's another prime minister. And I'm keeping carefully away from political view, but I just wonder the dilemma of this in that setting or any other setting that we have, that do you correct or stay the course is kind of the age-old discipline, and where we go and what do we do. And as I said, when we do our frontline interviews, we typically hear their reflection on what leaders have put into the system of another change, another process, that they say it feels that we haven't embedded the last one to even get the benefits on it. We often hear it feels I can't understand the case or rationale for this change. So there's this real difficulty of understanding the change, and therefore there's not usually high engagement or cooperation with it. And then you would talk to the leadership and they said, but we need this change because we aren't delivering our results. The market is moving fast. There's lots of pressure. Shareholders need this. Government needs that. And so we need to find a way that our frontline will engage with this. So, and then that you seem to get an impasse, and what happens is the performance doesn't improve. And I just want to offer this next slide a bit of framing for that. And it's not a universal truth, but it's just a framing of where change is more change frequency is more graciously and gratefully received than where it's not. So we see that the organisations and the frontline have tolerance for goal change. You can up a target, you can focus a little bit more on that. Absolutely receive that with more comfort. There's always dilemmas, but there's more comfort with goal change. But what they don't take so kindly to, if they experience the changes against the purpose of the organisation they've chosen to be of. So they say, can that stay more constant? There seems to be more willingness to explore the methodology that they bring to the work. They'll change a practice, change a technique, etc. But don't mess with the values by which I choose to do my work. So don't ask me to suddenly have less ethics or different ethics about something I prize. So can we please have more constancy, of course, there? And then where change of leadership versus change of team around leadership, there's there's a really interesting. It's probably more anecdotal than maybe a quantitative study, but of a number of practitioners that were talking, we were having a conversation about what is the ideal longevity of tenure for even the best of leaders. So your kind of leaders that bring in all the best qualities, but do they have a life to their best tenure, even if they're the best? And there was the consensus of this conversation of about 8-9 years, and it was purely because the freshness, energy, capacity was starting to fade, and sometimes it was moving away. So there's something about knowing the best lifespan even of the best leaders, and being ready for the change rather than what we've seen in the news where change comes upon us. And when that change disrupts the whole team structure that sits below, i.e. every single player on the pitch has to be moved around to honour the new leader, the disruption effect of months to years that stops performance happening whilst there's a reset and a readjust doesn't feel hugely helpful. So I've kind of done a very big topic, a little bit of justice around this course correction versus course continuity. And I would definitely say continuity for leaders is a difficulty because they're bright minds with excitement about new ideas, and they want to go after more because they've seen it. But actually, is it effective? And I'm love to hear your views on this. Course, staying with the course versus not. So, Tony, could you share your view of kind of this instinct of staying with course or the instinct to kind of course correct?
Yeah,
and whether that
I think sort of
is helpful or hindering.
The work that I've done, sort of particularly in the public sector, the government space. The government changed here, I'm going to say 2 years ago, and prior to that, it was sort of 2 years before that. And whenever there's a change in that government, there's a massive shift at the top of the organization. So the bottom of the organization stays fairly static in terms of most of the people just continue doing their jobs, but it's what that change is that comes in. And when you're sort of talking about purpose, values, and teams, it's sort of they're the things that I think are really challenged when those changes are brought about. And I don't know that they're seeing that, in terms of the disruption and, the lack of productivity that's brought about just as a result of that change every 2 to 4 years. And that's just at a very high level. Never mind the cascading effect of that happens as a result of that change. And so, when a new government comes into play in terms of just a state government for us here, that senior leadership change happens, and then there's a whole new let's say agenda in terms of deliverables that went from we were doing this yesterday to now we're doing this tomorrow. And I think it's really difficult for many people to get their heads around just what needs to happen in terms of that agility to be able to change with ease. There's a lot of resistance that comes with that, because there isn't sort of a clear understanding in terms of what that direction is or why the direction has changed. And I think just leaders need to be more understanding in terms of what the impact and effect of that will be, and the time that it takes to get the train moving again. It's sort of like it's a big long thing to get moving on the tracks, and although we may be now going on a different track in a different direction, but to get the train going, it takes so much energy and time and effort. That's what I think is what they're missing. And I'm sure that there's a better way of doing that, and I'm seeing that in terms of what you're presenting here. So there's a better understanding here than what there is in terms of sort of people that are at that senior level.
Yeah, so you're making a really strong case for constancy, and that's really speaking to me. And as I invite Lisa to share, because Lisa and I probably have experienced some of the consequences of where change is so volatile that we're probably still in a bit of recovery ourselves in terms of those experiences. But would you share your perspectives, Lisa, in terms of the dilemma that we're talking about?
Yes, I'm sorry. I stopped taking off my mic because my dog's just decided to play with the ball. So I apologise if there's barking in the background. I just wanted to pick on one thing that Tony said about leaders need to understand the impact that it's going to have on the teams. Another perspective as well is that a new leader, it takes time for that leader to establish and understand what they need to do as well. Just a really simple, hopefully, way of prescribing it is, I remember taking on the presidency of my speakers club. And you're president for 1 year. You're only allowed to do it for a year. But it took me at least 6 months to understand what that role was. So I always felt like I was trying to catch up. And then the next thing I know, it's the end of that tenure and I'm passing it on to somebody else.
Finding his stride, yeah.
So, when there's that constant change, I think we sometimes discredit those leaders because we say, well, why haven't they done it? They themselves are human beings and have to take that time to understand what they need, what they need to do. So I wanted to sort of wave the flag a little bit for leaders.
Yeah, honour that.
But I think, as a person working within an organisation, when change happens, if it's not communicated well, and especially the values piece for me, when the change appears to go against what I believe those values were, that's very hard. That's a very hard thing to deal with, because I feel that you're being challenged personally, and I've experienced it myself, and also working with an organisation and experienced and seen the impact on people where their key values, which they believed the organisation held, appeared to change, how hard that was.
Yeah.
People are, you know, psychologically unsafe.
Yeah. It becomes a non-negotiable, doesn't it?
But yeah, it does. So yeah, that's just my thoughts.
Alessandra, I'd love to. Sorry, Tony, did you want to add?
So I just wanted to add, because you know, we talked a little bit earlier about that sort of psychological safety and sort of how prevalent that's becoming. You know, one of the things that we're trying to shift, and one of the things that we're working more on, is sort of building that psychological resilience. You know, so how do we make people stronger? How do we build that muscle now so that they are more adaptable to change, or that they can accept that there is going to be this 6 months of sort of, you know, uncertainty or lack of direction until that comes in. But rather than people sort of fearing the worst, they're actually saying, well, we know this is going to happen now, and we can move forward with that. So yeah, it's understanding that, you know, people are feeling the psychological safety element, but how do we strengthen that? How do we shift that to a new way of approaching it and looking at it and building that muscle so that people are stronger and can weather the changes that are coming around them?
Oh, do you know, I feel that's a webinar to come, Tony. We may be seeking another late night from you, if that's okay, from Australia, because I think that's an absolutely great topic in the mix.
Yeah, definitely.
But Alessandra, just to complete the share and
Absolutely.
to come to our final slides that we've got for
so before sharing that, my take from like you, Lisa, and Tony conversation, I noticed that a good way to, if I'm like a new leader that enter into a company, and a very good way is to reduce the time that in order to understand that role or everything that they expect from me, is to have every time you need to track, you need to have a history of everything that you do. I notice a lot of companies, they don't have like a system, or they don't track any single step. Everything is in the mind of the leader. If it's in the mind of the leader and the leader pass away, goes on holiday or anything, any reason, you need to be able that someone else immediately understand what they need to do, and you need to have the steps. The steps allowed you also to improve the level of quality and reduce the level of complexity. So that is a good way based on my experience. To answer the question, or to share like my opinion in terms of changing or stay in terms of the course of action, I would strongly suggest you 95% should changing, because if you're not changing, it also means that you are not growing. So it depends on the goal and the purpose. If my goal is to grow the business and to have a let's say healthier workflow or healthier like a team, I always need to adapt myself and grow. So the only way that the only time that I need to stay constant is when I need to achieve the goal. Once I've achieved the goal, I need to set another goal. So for me is to say, okay, if I need to grow my business 10x, what do I need to do? And that is my goal. Once I achieve that goal, so I need to be consistent and persistent, and that is stay at the same level, at the same pace, then I need to set another 10x. Otherwise, nowadays with AI automation, it's quite difficult to stay competitive, because if you are not changing the course based on the new behavior of the market, you are gonna lose, let's say, market share. So my suggestion is 95% is changing by adapting, by listening the market or by listening the team, and just the 5% is the consistency, the persistence to achieve the final goal. But once you achieve the final goal, you need to change again.
I think it's a nice sort of build, because I'm in agreement, and there's an and that I want to bring that the next slide allows me to frame, which is, because I think what I'm hearing is our singular truth in this model is the clarity of direction. It's the set of measures that balance, that capture our success and value. They're our truth. So if we're getting competency levels delivered to the right level of execution, characteristics bringing it through, course correction will only be necessary if we're not delivering those metrics. So they become our kind of reference point to check about how agile, how much change we need to create and the resilience we need in the culture. I love that addition, Tony, in terms of doing it. But our truth becomes that measurement at the top to tell us are we achieving or are we kidding ourselves? Because then ultimately the performance results are the truth in these settings if we've got them well designed. So this slide, and this is by way of my final piece for this session, is to return to this diagnostic model. I hope we've given people a sense of each of the boxes, the interplay, the importance of being able to measure them and then work and do the whatever corrective work or any improvement work that you want to do. But I want to build on that Tony question is, how have these been used in practice? And as I said, we might do a diagnostic piece top to bottom. We may have a gateway aspect that we go and then we have this in our background, knowing it's playing its part. But one of the things that have been sort of well established, but such easy practice that people may be able to do, having listened to this call, is think of a work situation. It might be a meeting, it might be a newsletter, it might be a one-to-one. So some unit of work that goes on, and assess it from a point of view of how much of each of these boxes are captured. And I'm not saying there's a definitive number, but just assess whether each of these boxes are captured. So you've got a board meeting. Have you talked to the measurements? Have you talked to some cultural aspect, growth aspects? Have you talked to your competency performance? Have you spoken to your character? Have you looked at your course, your future, your path, and the risks around it? And if there's any gaps, that might be your first learning. And I've done this for a number of organisations. I've sat in and quietly watched their board meeting and time captured what topics have been done and where it sits, and simply played it back for the audience to take view of. In the main, when I've done exercises like that, most individuals and organisations will emphasise on the data of the direction. You may argue there could be better clarity, but they have the data there, and they certainly spend a lot of time talking about competency and task and to-dos, and very little in the other boxes. However, there was one favourite when I was doing this very early on, and they had done quite a lot of culture and character training and work, so they were really valuing the importance. And when I sat in on their meeting, it was a complete flip. So what had happened is the data of am I delivering the results that I need to deliver had been decided not to be relevant. There was description of culture, there was description of character, and there was work on competency, but not much on course and future and risk and whether there needs to be correction or constancy. And so the playback of this simply alerted them to, yes, they don't want to spend too much time on the data, but they do need to have it as a reference point to say, are all the other levers working and making the effect they want to? And they need to be far more future sighted, because for them in their market, which was very, very agile, there was high risk of not keeping up with the digital environment and some of the legal environment. So even just that simple illustration allowed them to take learning. So I'm going to wrap up the share of this and just invite Lisa to have some final words and some final invitations for everyone. But just a huge thank you. I've taken so much from the conversation myself. So thank you for willingly, Tony and Alessandro. We slightly hijacked you on this this call to say, can we share your knowledge? And I've taken so much from you. So thank you from me. Lisa.
Yes, and I want to reiterate that is thank you so much, Tony, Alessandro. It's been really lovely to have this conversation to open our minds to looking into this a little bit deeper. So thank you so much for getting involved. I hope that it's been useful to the two of you as well to maybe look at things slightly differently. Just there's a couple of QR codes on the slide now that hopefully everybody can see. If you would like to sign up to our Uplift newsletter, click on the QR code on the right hand side of the screen and you will be signed up to receive our newsletter, which comes out about once a month. And we might send you the odd email about other webinars and bits and pieces that we've got going on, but we won't blast you an email 3 times a day. Don't worry about that. Yeah. And Alessandra will probably tell us off if we did that anyway, because that's not the best way to do marketing. Yes. But if anybody is actually interested to maybe dig a little bit deeper, to have a team diagnostic or an experience of the Heart Stars model and what we can do, if you click the QR code on the left hand side of the screen, it will then send us a message and we will get in touch, have a conversation about what the best option is going to be for you, whether that's a Heart Stars diagnostic or we do a little bit of teamwork with you, just so you can see the impact that this can have. Sometimes it's, I find people need to maybe experience something to really get to grips with understanding what it can deliver. So feel free to click on the box on the left-hand side. And the temperature seems to be going down slightly, but I don't know whether that's just because my aircon unit has been going full blast for the last hour and a half. But thanks once again to Tony and Alessandro. It's been really great. Have you got any final thoughts, Kate, you want to add, or are we done?
I think that's a lovely wrap, and I'm sure once we press stop on record, I can catch up and have even more chats with them from very dear colleagues. Thank you.